So you can see I created this sample .sql file just to like practice with stuff, and really like Jinja's in two places here, right? You can see the curly bracket percentage here, and then the double curly bracket there. So you use the curly bracket percentage when you don't expect to actually like see this displayed. It's hard for me to word it to see it like rendered in the SQL. So you're not going to see colors like these colors right here. We're just using it to then generate this code. So ultimately, what should be happening here is we're defining a variable. That's like the set colors. Set is just how you define a variable, kind of like var. Like some of you might have seen like var, colors if you're doing JavaScript. So this is set colors, and then we just define the list. And then here we're just going through the loop. Again, there's no like actual output here, so that's why it's like the percent, square curly brace percentage. And then finally here we're outputting something. Okay, so you can see we can delete the quotation marks, and that will just display the color itself. Let's just do a dbt compile, and that will compile this code, I hope, and then dbt utils is undefined. I may have to. Let's just remove this. I think it's complaining about this right here. It's fine. I'll just comment it out. Yeah, it's still complaining about this. I'll delete it. Okay, so I just hadn't installed the package. That's why I'm saying dbt utils is undefined. I think I didn't install the utils package yet. All right. So what do we do so far? Right. What we did is in the sample.sql file, we basically are looping through this color. Let me remove this for now. I'll do this one more time. And now I should be able to go to the sample.sql file in Target to see where it's compiled and go here, and you can see what we're generating. Select red as number, select blue as number, select purple as number, union all after each of them. Remember, the union all will just stack one on top of the other. And that's what's happening here. Select red, select blue, union all, select purple, union all. Typically, when you're doing the stacking, right? If you think about like how we stacked our code here, you have the union all, after the first one, but not after the last one. Like for each one of these sources that we're combining, like HubSpot, RDS, it's like HubSpot, select all from, I guess, my HubSpot contacts, then combine with, right, union all, with the next data, customers, which comes from RDS. Then if we had a third one, it would be like union all, a second time, right, after this one. But you wouldn't have it the last time. So that's where we kind of have an error here, is because for each color, we're like selecting it, and then we're doing union all, you get one extra. If you look at the sample.sql, you kind of get one extra union all. Okay? So what you can do instead is there's this useful thing, which is if it's not the last iteration in the loop, then put union all. However, if it is the last iteration, don't put union all. Okay? So right now, I didn't do dbt compile yet. So currently, we're like this. And what we can see is there's a union all after each iteration. But if I put in this code, then this is saying, hey, basically don't do union all the last time. So this should be removed. right? If it's not loop.last, do union all. If it's not the last one, do union all, and then this just ends the if statement. Okay, so let's we can put this all in line and then run dbt compile again. And now if I go over here, right, that last union all is gone. Okay. And one thing you can do, if you want, you could just plug this in to PSQL. This is going to break, but we're pretty close. And then put a semicolon at the end. And you see this select red. This because we need quotation marks around, like red, blue, purple, for this to work in Postgres, for us to actually see those things. Like if I put quotation marks here, this will now display in Postgres. Semicolon. You see that? Red, blue, purple. So what we should do to get if you need something like those quotation marks, the way you can get them is just to put the quotation marks around this. Okay? So we define our three colors. Then, without those quotation marks, you can see it's just gonna it will look like this. It will just be a bare word, and then Postgres is gonna think this is a column. So instead we wrap the quotation marks around our double curly braces. Notice that because we actually want this color displayed, that's why we do the double curly braces, not this one, right? Here we actually want this outputted, right? And then, and then we end our for loop, and then here we have if it's not the last iteration, basically for everyone but the last one, put in union all, and now this should be pretty good in terms of at least generating some valid SQL. Let's get out of here and do dbt compile again. And now let's go over to our sample.sql in the compiled folder, right, which is right here. And now this is correct, right? We've removed the last union all. We have the quotation marks around, right? And I mean, I don't know why it doesn't give I think maybe in the run folder it will put in the semicolon at the end. This is all right. So if you just want to test it, that this is valid SQL, first you need to do PSQL. PSQL, and then just paste it in there, and then put in a semicolon at the end. Okay, and this is working fine. Now, why does this come in handy? Well, it comes in handy because, for the integration stuff in particular, right? What do? Well, we select basically all the same columns. Let's go in here, Stage, HubSpot, Companies. In integration, Companies. Think about how integration works. You go through for the HubSpot companies and for the RDS companies. For each of them, you select from the table, and you select the same columns basically from the table. Okay? And you do a union all to stack each of them, right? In this case, we're only doing 2, but remember, we can have contacts from HubSpot, from RDS, from Stripe, from Mixpanel, right? You can have 10 of these. So what would you do? You would define, remember we define the variable here. So this would be, maybe all of our sources that we want to combine, and then we loop through them. Now, one thing that doesn't work is, we just have to do a little bit differently, is in the original code where we're writing out everything, we have this with statement, right? We have our import CTEs, the with HubSpot companies, the with RDS companies. That gets a little complicated to do it that way. Instead, what you'll do is you'll just define the sources up top, and then you'll just have this. You'll start here with merge companies as, and then for source and sources, select basically the same columns from, and then from where? From ref of the source, where the source the first time is going to be this, and the second time is going to be this. All right? And then you don't need, this is basically almost exactly the same. So we can just delete this. And now what you want to do, the way I solve this is I just keep doing dbt compile and see if it gets close to generating my original SQL. So we'll do dbt compile. And it's pretty good at showing you where you have errors as well. But this seemed to have gotten close, or at least compiled. So now I'll just look at int companies, the rendered int companies. So that'll be here. And you can see, okay, with merge companies as. Select company ID, right? And here I have my union all, and I have this is extra, right? So what should I do? I should remove the if not. Sorry, let me go back to the original. Right, this one, my bad. Nope, I keep going the wrong one. Okay, here we are, for source and sources. We have that extra union all, so let's just remove that by doing percentage if not loop dot last and percentage, and then we'll end the if statement. End if, like that. And now that should be maybe better. So this should just give me a union all for all of them except for the last one. Let's see if I did it right. Okay, good for me. Looks like I did it. Okay. Let's go take, I'm always just doing this. Like if anything, I'm just showing you the process I would follow, which is to always kind of just look at how we did this. This should be here. So here's my union all, and now I just have one of them, right? And then the only other thing I have to do is basically put an if statement where this is going to be, if it's HubSpot, if the source is HubSpot, then then it would be company ID. And if the source, like as I loop through these sources, if the source is RDS, then it's going to be null here, right? Because when I'm not, remember I need these comps to line up, but when I'm pulling my data from RDS, this should be null. So that can just be like an if-else statement. I can show you how, if you look at the reading, it does show you how I did it. We'll just cheat a little bit for now. And maybe you can kind of follow along here. If we go to the end, you can see I'm basically doing this. Remember, if it's HubSpot, if HubSpot is in source, right? If the source is HubSpot, then I want to have the HubSpot. Then I want it to be company ID, right? Then when it's HubSpot, then I actually want this to be company ID. But when I'm not on HubSpot, then I want this to be null, right? Because there is not, when I'm pulling from RDS, there is not going to be a HubSpot company ID. And then it's the opposite here. When I'm actually have my RDS data, then I want RDS company ID to be that company ID from RDS. Otherwise, I want it to be null. Okay, so that's this next kind of line here. Is, sometimes I want to actually pull the company ID, and sometimes it has to be null. Let me see this. Can you achieve this with a case when? Maybe, but with case when, you typically only use that when you have like more than two branches. Here, this is fine. Like I would just use an if else. So let me just show you, I guess, what this would look like. We can just copy this. Yeah, I think this is okay. So I'll put this here. We'll go back to int companies. So you see that select company ID as HubSpot company ID, null as RDS company ID. But the thing is, we want it to be different. Like we don't want this to be the same for each of the lines. We want this to be HubSpot, select, let's just put it up here. So it's going to be select the name and then company ID if the source is HubSpot, else null as my HubSpot company ID, comma, company ID if RDS, else null, right, as RDS company ID. So this is, again, dependent on the source. If the source is RDS, we want it to actually be company ID. If we're not on RDS, instead we're on HubSpot or something else, put null. And now I can remove these from source. But we always want like that contact's name, you know? Let me just show you how what this generates. So I'll do dbt compile. And now we'll go back to in companies. And now this looks pretty good. You see that the first time, because I'm selecting from HubSpot, company ID, we are selecting company ID. But the second time, I'm selecting from RDS. So we have the null as HubSpot company ID. Okay? And here, this, for the next column, because I'm on HubSpot, we should have null as RDS. And here, because I'm on RDS, we should have null as HubSpot. And I'll just hold this up here so you can see it again. I'll put this on multiple lines. So you loop through all the sources. When it's HubSpot, then we actually want company ID. And when it's RDS, when it's not, then we want to select null. All right, and then you just want to confirm, run dbt compile and confirm that that actually generates the right SQL. Like I wouldn't do I would really do the dbt compile, then go over here and check it. Go to the compiled SQL to check it. All right. So there's the reading will walk you through that, but hopefully you're able to follow some of that. And then the only other thing to talk about is, adding tests. So for adding tests, you can see what I did was I just created a new file called schema.yaml. And schema, this file is used to describe the columns. It's different than sources. That's specific. Sources is just defined for using that source variable, that source method name. But schema is used both for, you can define tests. There's also you can add a description, and say first name is, I don't know, blah, blah. So if it's not clear, add a description about basic documentation about the column. And then here I'm just testing that first name is never null. And I'm just testing that last name is never null, right? And then you can run dbt test. I forget if it's tests or tests. And you can see that this is running the tests. So it's checking that Sage HubSpot contact's first name is not null. And same thing for the last name. And I wonder if we can find it. Is it here? Models, integration, staging, stage RDS companies. I wonder if we can find it, because it is generated. This is the schema.yaml in HubSpot. Does someone know where it is? Okay. Let me see if we can find the compiled SQL. And stage HubSpot schema.yaml. Oh, this is it. This is kind of cool. So we wrote out these tests, right? And it's it ran the tests. So what does it actually run? So we say columns, the first name is not null. What does it do? It runs this. Basically what it does is it runs the select statement looking for where the first name is null. And if there's more than one of them, then it will be a failure. Then it will show the failure, right? So basically what your tests do is say are there any cases, if everything should not be null, let's look for any failures. So here it's looking for anything breaking the rule. And if there's anything breaking the rule, it will throw an error. And you can always, like, say something did break the rule. A good thing to do, like you say you got, hey, there's one error. There's one thing that's null. What you would want to do is go to PSQL, Northwinds, go to your compiled test, which I found in staging schema right here, and just copy and paste that in here. And now select, find that record, basically. Like I can just do select star, give me all the columns back where we're violating the rule. And here we're not, but this is a good way to debug, right? By going to that compile SQL. So there was a question about if else versus if and if. Yeah, it's just, let's go back to it. We are here. Okay. So here it's or just remember this is the kind of true in, I guess we could almost use either. Well, the difference is here it's showing union all or it's showing nothing. So it's like if something's occurring, show union all, otherwise don't do anything. Right? In this case, it's like, if we're not on the last loop, show union all. So in the first two cases, show union all, otherwise show nothing. With the if else, it's if we're on, the correct source, the matching, like in this case, HubSpot source, then show company ID, render company ID here. Otherwise, it's not that I want you to do nothing. I want you to render null in the other case. That's the difference between, the question was, what's the difference between if else and if? Here it's do something or do nothing, or like display nothing, right? Display union all and then just don't print anything. Here it's, display company ID in one case and display null in the other case. Okay, so we would define tests for our sources in sources.yaml. No. You would define everything would occur. The question is where do you define tests, and does that depend on staging? I wonder, maybe you're right, David. I don't think so though. I think that you always define, I'll have to double check this, but I think that you always define tests in the schema. So you would have, if you needed to, I'll have to double check that. I think you always use the schema, but I'm not, but let me double check that. If you can define tests in your sources.yaml file as well. I just can't remember. One final thing just to point out, because it is a valid question. Like some people will ask you on interviews, like what data validation would you do? So a good way to get a sense of all the different types of validation you can do is to look at this library called Great Expectations. Its whole purpose, and it's like an enormous library, its whole purpose is for data validation. That's all it does. And in fact, there is a plugin for DBT. So you don't have to use I'm not asking you to use the plugin, but this is worth looking at just so you can get a sense of all the different ways that you may want to like test your code. For example, here's one, right? Like fewer rows than, right? Like if we're expecting to always have, like a few, like 300 customers or transactions, and then all of a sudden we find like 30, we're probably not syncing our data or something, right? Like somehow the data is not being read in properly. At least one of, right? Like these are all just kind of examples that you can think of. Accepted range is useful, right? Like an age range. For example, maybe we're not, maybe we shouldn't have kids on our website. So if people are below the age of 14, right, then that should throw an error, right? Something like that. But these are just good to look at to get a sense of all the different ways that you can validate your data and to have this